when we gathered in February and I laid out what I saw as the challenge going forward with the budget and the fiscal plan, you may or may not recall I talked about that gap that the lingering deficit represented. And I talked about how in our plan we were going to try and bridge that gap. I talked about economic growth generating some of the fiscal wherewithal to do that. I talked about expenditure control. I talked about some tax measures. And finally, I talked about some of the surplus asset sales. To cut to the chase in terms of the structure of the budget that'll be tabled later today, none of that has changed. And the construct is the same. The approach, the allocations, the taxation measures, all of that is as you saw it in the February presentation. And whilst I'm later be happy to answer any questions, I wasn't proposing to spend any time today going over all of that old ground, though I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have that derive from that material and the budget itself. The programming side, again, the same. It's pretty modest spending agenda, the early childhood development initiatives, the education and training grant program, all of that reappears and is part of the budget that will be tabled. And again, none of those numbers, approaches, or criteria are changing. What I thought I'd do today is start off by chronicling where we are, what is the gap that we are obliged to bridge in terms of erasing the deficit, and filling in the numbers that have been updated. You'll see in a moment the Economic Forecast Council was canvassed at the end of May. That has generated some updated numbers. Some of you have seen some of that in terms of the conference board. A couple of the banks, I think, have released numbers. And I'll fill you in on what that has done to our growth projection numbers and the impact that has on the fiscal plan. So if we go to the first slide, and you can do this in reverse order, the number that you may be most interested in at the outset is back when my predecessor introduced the budget for 12-13. In February 12, the deficit was projected to be 968. It is today predicted to be $1.14 billion. Now, I'm just going to caution you this: the public accounts will be released in July, in 2 or 3 weeks. These should be pretty close, but the public account numbers will be the final numbers. So this should be pretty close to where we think we'll end up for 12-13. So the two other lines that are probably worth noting in this, one relates to revenue and what happened to revenue over the course of the year, from when it was originally predicted to be $43.1 billion. It ended up being just over $900 million less than that. Natural gas we talked about in February. Little Mountain is a significant asset sale, significant revenue deriving from that. Didn't occur in 12-13, will in 13-14. And on the expenditure side, you can see that just over $500 million less was spent during the year to account for the revenue shortfall and address those challenges that arose through the course of the year. Again, we spoke about some of the measures that were taken, hiring freeze, salary freeze, to try to find those dollars and realize those savings. So that's our best estimate today, to be finalized with the release of the public accounts, as to where we ended up in 12-13. So looking ahead, go to the next one. This isn't great news. It is the Forecast Council that were somewhat more optimistic in January of this year than they are now. I suppose one can say that they have, in fact, come back to where the Ministry of Finance was in January, February, where we were predicting growth 1.6%. That's now the number that they have settled on for the year. And as a result, you'll also see that, following through on something that has become the practice over the last number of years, we, through the ministry, add in an additional buffer of prudence. And so our number, for the purpose of driving all of the other formula and methodologies that go into predicting revenues, for example, has been downgraded as well to 1.4. And in a moment, show you what we think the impact of that is going to be in terms of various areas, and more particularly the fiscal plan in its entirety. I thought I'd show you, though, what the result of this, coupled with some year-to-date evidence, means in a few areas. So on the employment side, you'll see that certainly the trend since we hit the bottom in March 09 has been in the right direction, has been positive. That trend of late, employment growth hasn't grown at the rate we would like it to, and we have more work to do. In February, we were predicting growth at 1.1%. Based on what we are seeing from the Forecast Council and the information that the ministry has accumulated, we think it's more likely to be 0.7. So when you hear the Premier and members of the government talking about both a preoccupation, fixation with projects and job creation and training, it is to address this. And I can say that we are still almost 110,000 jobs ahead of where we were back in 09, but our objective is to show growth on a continuous basis, and projects like LNG and what's happening in the mineral sector are a big part of making that happen. So when it comes to working with the private sector to create work, we have more work to do. Let's go to retail sales again. Trend lines all in the right direction, and that continues. But the folks that are charged with making predictions based on growth projection numbers now caution that, in their view, growth in retail sales will be closer to 1.8 than 3.5%. So that has been adjusted, and as you might expect, that drives predictions for revenue to government as well. And I'll show you in a moment what that looks like. Housing starts traditionally in the 28,000 range. Long and the short of it here is both the Forecast Council and the Ministry of Finance taking into account what's happening not just in BC but elsewhere in the country, reducing that number by about 800 or 900 units. I'll say this, and I say it cautiously because I think you have to be careful about how you say this. Anecdotally, since May, lots of information about projects that are now restarting and on the go, and candidly seems to be a bit of a buzz. But those numbers don't show up yet, and we can't budget on the basis of and won't budget on the basis of intuition or anecdotes. Right now, these are the these are the numbers that have revealed themselves. If that is true, and there is an acceleration or there is something more positive happening out there, it'll reveal itself statistically in 4 to 6 months. In the meantime, we are budgeting on the basis of the information that we have and the predictions that are provided by those who are charged with the responsibility for making those predictions. So what does all that look like? And I guess this is sort of from the point of view of offering you a quarterly fiscal update. This is probably the bottom line, and I'll focus in on the column 13, 14. So when we met in February, I was telling you that we were working and towards and predicting a modest surplus of $197 million for reasons I've alluded to. On the revenue side, we are predicting a decrease in the amount of revenue of just over $200 million. Some good news from the resource sector, and ironically, I suppose, from the natural gas sector. And I'll show you a graph in a moment that indicates where that good news is coming from and how it's materializing. I will say this, though. We are continuing to employ the methodology and approach that Dr. O'Neill recommended. So I'll show you that in a moment. We haven't suddenly become more optimistic. We are still taking the projections from the bottom 20 percentile of those who predict these things. However, the price is up, and the predictions for where the price is going to be are more positive today than they were back in February. A slight decrease in federal transfers, and these are the puts and takes. Bottom line is that about $124 million less in predicted revenue. Now, if we did nothing about that, that would leave us with a far too slim surplus of $73 million. You'll see there that we are drawing down, for budgeting purposes, the forecast allowance. I think doing that to the extent we are, 25% of the forecast allowance, 25% of the way through the fiscal year is acceptable, is still responsible. So we are drawing down a quarter of the way through the year, a quarter of the forecast allowance, which then leaves us with a again, modest surplus, would leave us with a modest surplus of $123 million. That, in my view, is still not enough. And so you'll see the one change is we are putting ministries on notice that across government we are going to be looking for $30 million in savings, and in this fiscal year. And we're going to be planning on that basis. So on a budget of $44 billion, it is obviously a very small percentage, 0.07. If we were a family earning 60 grand, it'd be about 42 bucks. You put it in those terms, it sounds easy. It's not really that easy. But it is achievable. And it does, at the end of the day, accomplishing that, if all of the other numbers remain constant as we predict, which undoubtedly they won't. But that would leave us with a surplus now of $153 million. I'll speak in a moment about the debt to GDP numbers, which you see there, but I'll do so in comparison with what appeared in the February numbers. I think let's go to the gas. Let's. I thought about those areas where we spent a bit of time discussing matters last time, where there might be some interest in terms of, are we achieving our targets and are we on track? So here's where we are on the property and asset sales. About 38%, 25% of the way through the year, we've realized on 38% of the goal in terms of the amount being sought. That being a combination of the sale of the financial instrument, the sinking funds, and the property sold. On the next slide, and you've got this information, those are the properties for which agreements have been completed, sales have either occurred or the contracts are in place. The next tranche of 9 properties are there. So what I can tell you on that front is we are at 38% of the targeted amount, and of the properties that have sold, I am advised that we have realized about $8 million in excess of what was predicted or budgeted for on those properties. So that's where we are on the asset side. I talked about gas prices. It's a bit of a busy slide, but the long and the short of it is all of the forecasts for gas prices have gone up. At the time we met in February, we were talking about, I think, debates between $1.80 and $1.90 or $1.70 and $1.80. I can't remember precisely. We're now in the in excess of $2.25 range, which falls within the lower band of the private sector forecasts, and those forecasts have gone up on the basis of what's happened over the course of the first 5 months in 2013, and storage estimates and demand. So again, following the advice of Dr. O'Neill, we're still taking the lower estimate, but even the lower estimates in the case of natural gas have gone up fairly significantly, and that's good news because we're seeing the benefits of that on the revenue side. Next, so this is kind of perhaps I was anticipating one of the questions that you might ask, what's different, or where do the differences reveal themselves? You see the 2 columns, February 2013, June, both are balanced. To be sure, the June budget being introduced later today shows an even smaller modest surplus than the one in February did. The debt to GDP increases to 18.5 before going down. That, I'm told, is largely the function of the denominator that follows from slower economic growth. But it is not the product of any new or additional capital projects. But we are very alive to this, because realizing on our commitment to ensure that number begins to drop during the course of the fiscal plan is one of those things that I am told and have learned the bond rating agencies tend to focus on. And you know that we place a measure of importance in the AAA credit rating that we've achieved, and are anxious to demonstrate that we are worthy of preserving that. So realizing on that target becomes very important for us. Spending in the budget in February, I've already, I think, again described it as a pretty modest spending agenda. Nothing new in this update or in this budget. No change to the capital plan. I've spoken to the forecast allowance and the fact that it is being drawn down in this fiscal year and reduced slightly in the out years by $25 million. The contingency amount does not change for any of the years in the fiscal plan. That's really the summary in terms of where we're at and what the impact is. So slightly lower surplus, still achievable, not as large as I'd like it to be, and achieving that requires even a little bit more, based on these numbers, even a little bit more belt tightening within government to the tune of $30 million. So I think the drill is for me to leave you in the capable hands of officials, and then let you sharpen your claws, and I'll come back in a half an hour. Thanks, everyone.